Hi all, it's Mary Harper with the Florida Association for the Education of Young Children. I'm here to bring you Legislative Watch number 4. We're modestly into session and we're not seeing a lot of movement on several of the bills that have been listed in the Legislative Watch. So this week, unlike last week, I'm going to focus a whole lot on one piece that's not even made it to a full bill that's been proposed, but rather it's in draft form and it's being circulated. And since it seems to be the hot topic, I'm going to really focus in on it. And of course, I encourage you to review the Legislative Watch for any content that may be relevant to you. And again, of course, as always, where they are in House or Senate will be clearly delineated. The Florida Association for the Education of Young Children produces a Legislative Watch weekly as the Florida House and Senate begin their work in a continued effort, of course, to promote our public policy platform. We have 3 areas with which we focus: the quality of early childhood programs, the work, compensation, and professionalization of early childhood educators, and access and funding of statewide early childhood programs and systems. And the intent, of course, is to protect the state's most valuable commodity asset and future, young children. And what's most interesting, though, one piece of drafted legislation that I'm going to speak to you about hits all 3 of these areas. And so that's why it seems to have a lot of implications for what might transpire for the rest of the session for us. I kind of orient you to the overall nature of this drafted legislation. It's a piece of drafted legislation from Representative O'Toole. It's being circulated, and it reflects some of the components which we were watching in Senate Bill 1722, which is an exact replication of a bill that was vetoed by Governor Scott. But that Senate Bill 1722 just spoke to school readiness. This current drafted legislation speaks to both school readiness initiatives as well as voluntary pre-kindergarten initiatives. And to be totally honest, it is a reflection of what already exists with some tweaks, modifications. So we will continue to monitor it, but I want to speak to some of the specificity. Again, it's a drafted piece of legislation, which means it is being circulated for feedback, it's being thoroughly reviewed. So what I'm doing is giving you an idea of what those 109 pages said, generally speaking. So I'm going to talk first about the promotion of quality early childhood programs. And again, this is one of our platforms. This is why I'm going to talk about it in the way I'm going to talk about it. But I'm going to give a general overview of the whole piece and then talk specifically how it relates to promotion of quality early childhood programs. In general, the bill focuses on governance, accountability, transparency, and funding. And when we break it apart into our public policy platform, we see that in each or some of these subcategories, we hit a little piece of what we stand for. And so one of the pieces about promotion of quality early childhood programs, there's a discussion about pre-post assessments and being developmentally appropriate, and the fact that they should show growth, developmentally appropriate growth over time. Some talk about approved curriculums. But it also talks about how the Florida Department of Education, there will be no longer an Office of Early Learning, but there will be a division of early learning under the Florida Department of Education. But it will operate separate from the K through 12 system and should not be an exact replication. So that speaks to the fact that they do see that birth to 5 is a unique period of development for children. Further, it includes, as school readiness legislation has always included, information about health and safety requirements. And the Gold Seal rate is re-mentioned, as those of you know. Gold Seal holds some privileges, and to receive it currently, it's a nationally accrediting agency designation. Well, it replaces that term nationally with accrediting agency. However, it leaves in place the committee that designates which accrediting agencies would be recognized by the state. So it does still have in the parameters with agencies who have expertise in numerous areas of early childhood who can say that's an indicator of quality. So we'll continue to monitor that. The next area is establishment of professional development systems and support. And again, this is just standardized competencies, professional development and training registry, those kinds of things that help move the professional with which Florida Association for the Education of Young Children represents towards professionalization, towards attaining goals with which our professionals choose. And one small tidbit that was in there was to provide a coordinated professional development system that supports the achievement and maintenance of core competencies by school readiness instructors and helping children attain performance standards adopted by the Division of Early Learning. So just again, it acknowledges the fact that professional development is quite important and significant, especially in the role of the teacher who serves children, and we know that teachers have the greatest impact on a child's development in addition to families. They work in tandem together. So increased access and funding to state early childhood programs. We see school readiness right here, and we see voluntary pre-kindergarten. What's really unique about this drafted legislation is that it combines both school readiness and voluntary pre-kindergarten under this Division of Early Learning. And all these little small sub-bills that we continue to monitor this legislative session kind of become superfluous in the sense that all of it's captured under the singular document. Again, I mentioned that it talks about the creation of the Division of Early Learning in the Florida Department of Education, continuity of the existing Early Learning Coalition, so it still allows communities to have some ownership over how they conduct business with school readiness and voluntary pre-kindergarten, but of course under the parameters, because there's a lot of standardization for the school readiness providers and the VPK contracts that will come from this state, and not too much of a shift of how it has always been, although there'll be some local level input that won't be necessary. Single point of entry data system, ELIS, we've been talking about this forever. So it's in there, it's just not listed as ELIS, but it is a single entry data system. There'll be they talk about child eligibility priorities too, are mentioned in there. They're not unlike the priorities that have already existed, so it still gives local coalitions some flexibility, but really focusing on early childhood and the needs of those at-risk youth. Standard monitoring tools. Clear delineation of responsibilities from the state, the early learning coalitions and providers. It's very thorough. And transparency and avoidance of duplication between and amongst agencies. And of course, child payment rates, how those will be conducted, the auditing processes, all those kinds of things that no one wants to talk about because they can be extremely boring. But it is very thorough and written out. Not, again, unlike current school readiness legislation or VPK statutes that already exist. It's just combining those elements and adding some clarification. And that's really all I have this week. I encourage you to read the Legislative Watch to see that there's not a whole lot going on other than this draft. In future reporting of this, you may see it in 2 locations in the Legislative Watch. We will determine based on what the final product is where that gets placed in the Legislative Watch. Further, it's being, there's word on the street that it will be introduced today. I don't know if that is accurate, and based on what we see in the official document filed, then we will be updating you. And if there is a need for you to react to any legislation that's in the Legislative Watch, we'll send out what we call the Legislative Alert. Different than a watch. Watch, you're just hanging around watching. Alert means need to react. So just keep your eyes peeled for anything that may require your immediate response. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to talking with you next week.